They say a Viking's word was stronger than steel, but a woman's oath that was sacred blood. In the frost-covered clans of the north, silence wasn't just expected from women, it was extracted. And when a woman broke a blood oath, the punishment wasn't just exile or death, it was transformation, erasure, a horror ritual hidden beneath layers of myth and honor. History remembers the glory of Viking kings and their raids, but it forgets the women who were hunted for a whisper and the terrifying rituals that made sure they never broke silence again. The snow was falling like ash when Astrid knelt before the fire pit, her hands trembling over the blade that would seal her vow. Around her, the elders stood like carved statues, faces unmoved, voices quiet. "Name him not," the eldest woman whispered, cutting Astrid's palm and holding hers over the flame. Blood sizzled on stone. "Let the gods hear." The village watched in silence, and the boy whose name she had once spoken, the chieftain's son, stood behind the crowd like a shadow. The oath was clear. She would never speak of him again, never claim love, never recall what happened in the woods the night he made promises he didn't intend to keep. A year passed. Astrid worked beside her mother, wove cloth, sang lullabies to others' children. She was quiet. She was obedient. But silence is not the same as forgetting. One evening, while mending a torn tunic, she whispered his name aloud. Not in defiance, in mourning. A child heard her. He asked his mother, and by dusk, the village knew. The next day, the same stone fire pit was lit. The same blade was passed, but this time, the blood was not offered, it was demanded. "You broke your oath," the elder said. And the oath was not yours alone. It was tied to this land, to this clan, to the gods who watched you swear. Astrid stood barefoot in the snow, head bowed, no tears. Only the sound of wind catching in the trees like breathing. The punishment was not execution. It never was. Death was too quick. What came next was older than any saga, a ritual no skald sang of, passed from mother to daughter in the coldest parts of the north. They called it the Silent Hunt. She would leave the village that night with nothing but the clothes on her back. No food, no tools, no name, and if she returned, she would not return whole. A carved wooden token was pressed into her palm. It bore no symbols, just a blank surface, polished smooth by the hands of many women before her. As she was led to the forest's edge, no one met her eyes, not even the boy who once promised her forever. The last sound she heard was the fire crackling behind her, and the heavy breath of the clan closing its mouth around her memory. The cold swallowed her quickly. Astrid walked barefoot into the tree line, the snow thick as wool beneath her feet, the sky bleeding into dusk. There were no torches, no path, only the crack of branches behind her as if something or someone was already following. She didn't look back. In the old stories, the Silent Hunt was a myth mothers used to scare their daughters into obedience, but Astrid had never known it to be real until it wrapped itself around her. The forest stretched in all directions like a cage with no door. Her fingers stiffened, her breath came in short clouds, and she gripped the smooth wooden token like a talisman, though it offered no warmth and meant nothing anymore. The deeper she went, the more the forest changed. The air grew still. The snow no longer crunched, it muffled. Trees leaned inward as though eavesdropping. And high above, ravens circled without sound. She walked until her legs shook, then collapsed beside a fallen tree. The silence pressed against her eardrums, thick and wrong, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Then came the noise. A whisper not in words, but in rhythm, twigs breaking, a breath exhaled too close, the long drag of something soft across bark. She froze. Shadows moved, not like animals, but slower, deliberate. Astrid knew she was not the first girl sent into these woods. She remembered the stories, women whose names were erased from the clan records, whose mothers claimed they'd died of fever, but now she understood why those names vanished. The forest didn't kill them, it changed them. A shape moved beyond the trees, too tall, too still. Astrid scrambled backward, her bare heels sinking into ice. The figure didn't follow, it only watched. When she closed her eyes and opened them again, it was gone. In its place, at the base of a gnarled pine, was a scrap of cloth, frayed wool, stained dark. with a single braid of blonde hair knotted through it. Astrid didn't touch it. She knew better. She walked again, slower now, hunger curling in her stomach, fear rising like bile, and then she heard a voice. Faint, almost not there. A woman's voice, singing not a melody of comfort, but something fractured, broken, the sound of someone who had forgotten what it meant to be heard. Astrid followed. The voice moved like smoke, always just ahead, impossible to catch, but something in it felt familiar. Not the words, which she couldn't understand, but the pain tucked behind them. When the sound finally stopped, she found herself in a clearing where the snow had been trampled down to dirt. At the center stood a ring of standing stones, and hanging from each stone, braided cords of human hair, some long, some short, all tied with scraps of red cloth. Astrid didn't scream. She didn't cry. She only stepped forward, barefoot and silent, into the graveyard of oathbreakers, and understood that the hunt had only just begun. By the second night, Astrid no longer felt her feet. The cold had crept past her skin and taken up residence in her bones. Hunger twisted in her belly like a knot of worms, but worse was the thirst, dry tongue, dry lips, her breath sharp like glass inside her throat. Still, she walked. The forest seemed to shift behind her, sealing up the trail she left like she had never passed through. Time meant nothing. The moon rose and fell. The light filtered through the branches in slashes, and the wind spoke in voices she couldn't quite place. She came upon a tree marked with runes, deep cuts into the bark that bled sap like old wounds. She recognized some of the symbols. They were blood marks, oath sigils, carved not by hand but by blade. Each one was a record, each one a curse. This tree was older than the village, older than the clans, maybe even older than the gods. And every rune had been etched by women, women like her. Women who had spoken when they should have stayed silent, who had named the dead, who had broken bonds made not with ink but with blood. Some were marks of protection, old magic used by the seer women, the ones who heard the gods in the wind, but others were names, names that should have never been said aloud. Astrid pressed her palm to the bark. The wood was warm, not from the Sunday, from something deeper. She remembered what her grandmother once told her, that the forest takes only what it's owed, that when the blood oath is broken, the debt is not paid by the voice but by the body. She turned from the tree and found a narrow path leading down into a ravine, where the snow had melted and the ground steamed with mist. At the base was a pool, dark, unmoving, framed by stones shaped like jagged teeth. She crawled to the edge and drank. The water was bitter, metallic, not right. But she didn't care. As she looked into the reflection, she did not see herself. The woman in the water was older, face hollowed, mouth sewn shut with black thread. Astrid recoiled, her breath catching in her chest. But the image held, and then it smiled, not with lips, with eyes. She scrambled back, heart pounding, and wiped her mouth, but the taste lingered. Something was happening to her, not just in the body, but in the soul. The further she walked, the less she remembered her own voice. She tried to hum once, to feel something familiar, and nothing came out. Not a note, not a breath. Only silence, and deep in that silence, footsteps, not hers, not animal, a rhythm, steady and cruel, like the beating of a war drum far away. The hunt was moving closer. She was no longer being tested, she was being claimed. The footsteps grew louder with each hour, though she never saw who made them. They stayed just beyond the edge of sight, pacing with patience that felt older than time. Astrid no longer walked, she drifted, her limbs wooden, her breath shallow, her name distant. Hunger gnawed at her but felt useless now, like an echo bouncing inside a hollowed body. The forest didn't want her dead, it wanted her undone. That night, the wind changed. It carried a scent, something foul and sweet, like rotting meat wrapped in crushed flowers. Astrid followed it, not out of curiosity, but because her legs did. They moved without her asking, as if drawn by something older than will. The trees thinned into a clearing she hadn't seen before. At the center stood a massive stone altar, blackened by soot and stained with rust-colored streaks. Around it, hanging from low branches, were bones, small ones, carved and etched with spirals, some still bearing scraps of braided hair. A circle of ash surrounded the altar, broken only in one place where a trail of footprints entered but did not exit. Astrid stepped across the line. The air turned warm, wet, as though the forest had lungs, and it was exhaling right into her skin. Then she saw the figure, a woman, or something shaped like one, standing beside the stone. Her back was to Astrid, hair long and matted with dirt, her dress torn and damp, clinging like a shroud. Astrid opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came, not a gasp, not a word, not even breath. The woman turned. Her face was blurred, features smeared as if painted on and then wiped away. Where her mouth should have been was smooth skin, blank. And yet Astrid felt it, the scream buried inside her. The woman raised her hand and pointed at Astrid's chest. Then she pointed to the stone. Astrid stepped forward. Her hands trembled, and the wooden token slipped from her grip. It landed with a dull sound, and the moment it touched the altar, it split in two. There was no sound, but the world flinched. The trees leaned back. The bones rattled, and behind her, the footsteps stopped. Astrid turned slowly. She wasn't alone anymore. They stood in a circle, women with mouths sealed by black thread, their eyes sharp and alive, some weeping blood, others smiling gently as if welcoming a sister home. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Astrid understood. This was the second part of the punishment, the part never told. The exile was not the end, it was the offering. If you broke a blood oath, you left the village behind. But if you broke it knowing the weight of your voice, you were given a choice. Join the Watchers, or be hunted by them. The altar pulsed beneath her fingers, and in the silence, something ancient reached up through the stone and began to listen. She awoke beneath the altar. Her skin was marked, not with wounds, but with symbols, faint white lines stretching across her collarbone, her wrists, her stomach. They pulsed like old scars stirred awake. Astrid didn't remember falling asleep. She didn't remember closing her eyes, but she remembered the voice. Not spoken aloud, not even heard but felt, like the sound of grief held inside the body for too long. It had crawled into her bones, made a home behind her ribs. It had said nothing, but she understood. She would not return as she was. She was not meant to. When she stood, the Watchers were gone. The clearing was empty, the altar cold. But her token split in two remained at her feet, its pieces now blackened at the edges. She picked them up. They burned. She did not drop them. Instead, she tucked them into her dress and walked, this time not away from the forest, but deeper into it. The trees seemed to part for her now. Her steps didn't echo. Her breath didn't rise. The forest no longer treated her as prey. It treated her as kin. She came upon a path of bones, tiny vertebrae strung between branches like beads. At the center stood a hollow tree, wide enough to enter, slick with moss and rot. Something was waiting inside. Astrid didn't hesitate. The hollow swallowed her in darkness. Inside, the air was warm, thick with breath, and filled with the scent of pine and iron. Her hands traced the walls, symbols etched into bark, names, maybe, warnings, a cradle of silence, and then a whisper, not hers, not human. It called her by the name she had buried, the one she swore never to speak again. She should have been afraid. Instead, she opened her mouth to answer, and nothing came out. Her voice was gone, not hoarse, not broken, gone, carved out clean like a missing tooth. Panic struck her only for a moment, then it passed. She remembered the Watchers. Their silence wasn't weakness, it was a price. She was being unmade, reshaped. They were turning her into something that could not betray, something that could not be tempted. The voice returned no words, just weight, and with it came a flood of memory, not her own. Dozens of women, hundreds, oathbreakers, lovers, mourners, rebels, all hunted, all silenced, all offered the same choice beneath the altar. Some chose to run, some chose to bleed. The ones who stayed became part of the forest, part of the right. They were not spirits. They were not gods. They were reminders, living warnings with no tongue to soften truth. When Astrid left the tree, it was dusk again. Time didn't pass the same anymore. Her skin felt wrong. Her heart beat slow. She didn't feel like a girl. She felt like a blade still being forged. And behind her, from the hollow tree, came the first sound she had heard in days, a soft hum, low and steady, like a mother singing a child to sleep before the end. The forest changed its shape when the voice was gone. Trees leaned differently, as if bowing when she passed. The cold no longer bit, it clung, like a second skin. Astrid walked without hunger now, without thirst, without thought of return. Her name had faded somewhere between the altar and the hollow tree, and she did not miss it. In its place was a rhythm, a new silence, not empty, but full, like a drum that never sounded, yet always beat. She followed it. Somewhere in the deep woods, the path split. One side curved upward toward the cliffs, where ravens circled in slow spirals. The other dipped into a basin filled with fog. The watchers waited below. She could feel them, not with her eyes, with her blood. She chose the basin. The fog curled around her ankles like smoke, and the deeper she walked, the more the earth changed. The snow gave way to dark moss. Stones marked the path, not randomly placed, but carefully, each carved with a different rune. She couldn't read them, but her fingers ached when she passed too close. She knew what they meant. These were not prayers. They were records. Names of those who failed the rite, women who spoke when they should have burned, oaths broken not in rebellion but in sorrow. The path led to a shallow pool, black and still. Floating on its surface were objects, locks of hair, cloth dolls, tokens like hers, some split, some whole, all marked by fire. She knelt beside it. Her reflection did not greet her. Instead, another face stared up, hollow-eyed, mouth sewn shut, but not angry, not afraid, just waiting. Behind her, the watchers appeared, 5 of them, thin, tall, wrapped in threadbare cloaks the color of ash. Their mouths were sealed, but they spoke in silence. She did not need words. She knew why they had come. This was the choosing place, where the rite ended or deepened. One of the watchers held a knife. It was simple, bone-handled, worn. They extended it. Astrid didn't flinch. She took it. Her hand didn't shake. She was not being asked to cut herself. She was being asked to choose, silence or death, not for punishment, for purpose. The ones who refused would vanish, torn by the woods, erased. The ones who offered their voice willingly would be changed, used, bound to the hunt not as prey, but as keeper. Astrid placed the blade against her lips. The metal stung. She closed her eyes and remembered the boy's name, the one she had whispered. It no longer hurt to remember. That pain had been carved out. In its place, peace. She lowered the knife. She would not cut her mouth. Not yet. There was something else the forest wanted first. From behind the trees, the sound of breathing came. Fast. Human. Someone was entering the basin. A girl, younger than Astrid, crying, running, marked. Another oathbreaker had been cast into the woods, and the hunt had begun again. The girl stumbled into the basin like a fawn torn from its mother, her hands raw, her face streaked with dirt and blood. She collapsed near the pool, gasping, looking over her shoulder as if the very sky hunted her. Astrid did not move. She watched from the shadow of the stones, the blade still warm in her hand. The girl was young, maybe 13, maybe less, too small to carry the weight of an oath, but marked all the same. Around her neck hung a wooden token, unburned, unbroken, fresh. The watchers stepped back into the fog, vanishing the way they always did, leaving Astrid alone with what had come. The girl whimpered. She did not see Astrid yet. She only curled beside the water and cried. The sound tore through the basin like thunder, a voice, a real, living voice. Astrid flinched, not from fear, but memory. Her throat pulsed. It had been days or weeks since she'd heard such sound. It hurt to hear it. It reminded her of something she wasn't anymore. The girl's sobs grew louder. She began to speak, pleading, rambling. Names fell from her mouth, her mother's, her brother's, even the name of the boy who had made her break her vow. And Astrid knew she had spoken too soon. The hunt was already listening. From the trees came a sound, not footsteps, not breath, but something deeper, a pulling, like the forest exhaling just once and dragging all light with it. The girl froze. Her words stopped. Her eyes locked onto Astrid's shape in the fog. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Astrid stepped forward. The girl scrambled backward, her hands slipping in wet moss. "Please," she whispered, voice shaking. "I didn't mean to. I didn't know." Astrid opened her mouth. Nothing came. She raised the blade. The girl screamed. But the blade was not for her. Astrid dropped it at the girl's feet. Slowly, she reached into her dress and pulled out the broken token, the one split by fire. She placed it beside the blade. Then she turned and walked to the edge of the basin. Behind her the girl trembled, but she did not run. She watched. And when Astrid vanished into the trees, the girl followed, not with her feet, with her eyes, as though memorizing the path of someone she might become. Astrid did not stop. She moved toward the sound now, the breathing in the woods, the old rhythm, the source of the hunt. She was ready, not to be taken, to take. The forest no longer tested her. It had accepted her, not as a girl, not even as a woman, but as a watcher. And as the wind shifted and the snow began to fall again, she understood the final rule of the blood oath. Once you break it, your silence doesn't redeem you, it binds you. Forever. Years passed, though no one in the village could say how many. The seasons turned as they always did, and new daughters were born beneath the same blood moon that had once marked Astrid's exile. No one spoke her name now, not from cruelty, but from fear. It was said that to utter the name of an oathbreaker invited the woods to listen, and the woods never forgot a voice. Mothers warned their daughters not to love too deeply, not to whisper promises in the dark, not to trust the hearts of boys with soft hands and harder fathers. But even warnings can't quiet longing. One night, a girl named Freya stood at the village edge, her feet bare in the frost, her hands shaking as she reached for the boy who promised her the world. They had carved runes into a birch tree, sworn to be each other's, but when the spring thaw came, so did the council. Freya had spoken of the boy during a quarrel, a moment of rage. Her words had been heard, a child had repeated them, and so the rites began again. The fire was lit, the blade was passed. Her token, still fresh with her blood, was pressed into her hand. But something was different this time. When she was cast into the forest, she did not cry. She did not beg. She walked into the dark as if returning home, because the stories had changed. Quietly, between women, stories of the watcher who left behind her blade. The watcher who spared the girl, the one who did not forget what it meant to have a voice, even after hers was taken. Freya wandered the same woods Astrid had. She saw the runes in the trees, felt the earth pulse beneath her. She drank from the still pool and saw not herself but a woman standing behind her in the reflection. Tall, pale, mouth stitched shut, eyes alive with something more than memory. A protector, a warning, a ghost who did not fade. Freya pressed her token to the altar. It did not split. It burned clean and turned to ash. Behind her, footsteps, not her own. She turned, and standing at the basin's edge was Astrid. No longer girl, no longer name, only presence. Freya did not run. She knelt. Astrid raised a hand, not in judgment, in welcome. And so the line continued, not of oathbreakers, but of women who remembered. Women who once loved, who once spoke, and who now stood watch in the silence that men had written into law. The village still speaks of the curse, of the hunt, of the girls who vanish into trees, but they don't know the truth. The forest is no longer a prison. It's a sanctuary made of broken vows, stitched mouths, and the terrible freedom of being feared. And somewhere deep in the fog, when a girl whispers the wrong name, the watchers begin to walk, not to punish her, but to welcome her home. Comment the oldest legend from your country, especially the ones no one dares to say aloud. If you want more stories that whisper through bone, blood, and silence, like and subscribe to The Black Chapter for the horrors history tried to bury.